The sky over Seoul was the color of a fresh bruise, a swirling mix of violet and charcoal that promised violence. From the 45th floor of the Obsidian Tower, the city looked like a circuit board of glittering lights, cold and indifferent. Song Ji-soo pressed her forehead against the floor-to-ceiling glass, the condensation chilling her skin. It was the only sensation that felt real. For 3 weeks, she had been a ghost haunting this aquarium of steel and gray silk. The air inside was recycled, scrubbed clean of the city's smog, smelling faintly of sandalwood and ozone, the scent of him. She pulled the cashmere cardigan tighter around her shoulders. It was too big, swallowing her slender frame, the fabric soft as a whisper against her skin. It belonged to him. Everything here belonged to him. The heavy oak door at the far end of the expansive living room clicked open. The sound was soft, precise, like the chambering of a round. Ji-soo did not turn. Her body went rigid, a physical rejection of his presence. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a trapped bird throwing itself against the bars of a cage. She heard the heavy thud of his footsteps absorbing into the thick Persian rug, getting closer. "You have not eaten," a deep voice rumbled, vibrating through the space between them. Kang Tae-oh. The name alone was enough to make grown men in boardrooms sweat through their tailored shirts. The head of the Chong Seoul Syndicate. The Monster of Mapo. "I'm not hungry," Ji-soo whispered, her breath fogging the glass. That was not a request, Ji-soo. He was close now. She could feel the heat radiating from him, a furnace wrapped in an Italian suit. She turned slowly, her back pressing against the cold safety of the window. Tae-oh stood barely 2 feet away. He was a landscape of sharp angles and terrifying power. His eyes, dark as poured coffee, swept over her with a possessiveness that made her skin prickle. He had discarded his jacket, his white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the corded muscle of his neck and a glimpse of the ink that stained his skin, the dragon scales that marked him as royalty in the underworld. In his hand, he held a silver tray. A bowl of porridge, steaming gently, and a glass of water. Domestic. Absurd. The juxtaposition of the brutal warlord playing nursemaid made Ji-soo's stomach churn. "Eat," he said, placing the tray on the low marble table. "Dr. Choi says your weight is dropping. Maybe if you let me go, I'd get my appetite back," she shot back, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Tae-oh's jaw clenched, a muscle feathering near his ear. He stepped into her personal space, planting a hand on the glass beside her head. The scent of him, expensive tobacco, rain, and something metallic, like old pennies, invaded her lungs. "You know the rules," he murmured, his voice dropping to a dangerous baritone. "Outside this door, you are dead." Song Ji-soo, the promising violinist, drowned in the Han River 3 weeks ago. That is what the world believes. That is what keeps you breathing. Is this breathing? Ji-soo gestured to the silent, luxurious prison. "This feels like a tomb. Better a tomb than a shallow grave." His eyes dropped to her lips, and for a second, the air in the room grew heavy, charged with a static electricity that made her toes curl. He was not just guarding a witness, he was hoarding a treasure. That was the terror of it. He looked at her not with hatred, but with a hunger that was far more dangerous. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to the sofa. Ji-soo hesitated, then obeyed. Defiance had its limits when your captor could snap your neck with the same ease he buttoned his cuffs. She sat on the edge of the gray velvet sofa, taking the spoon. Her hand trembled. Tae-oh watched her, his dark eyes unblinking. He walked to the wet bar, pouring himself a tumbler of amber liquid. The ice clinked, a sharp, lonely sound. "Why?" she asked, forcing herself to swallow a spoonful of the bland porridge. "Why did not you just kill me that night? It would have been cleaner." Tae-oh took a sip of his drink, the liquid coating his throat. He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable, a mask of stone. "Because," he said softly, "you have terrible timing." 3 weeks ago. The rain at Incheon port had been torrential, sheets of water turning the world into a blurred watercolor painting. Ji-soo had been there for the wrong reasons, a shortcut home after a late rehearsal, a wrong turn down a service road, a flat tire that left her stranded in the industrial sector. She had seen the lights first. The headlights of 3 black SUVs cutting through the gloom. She had frozen behind a stack of shipping containers, clutching her violin case to her chest like a shield. Voices. Shouting. And then, the unmistakable crack of gunfire. She should have run. Her brain screamed at her to run. But her legs had turned to lead. She peered around the rusted metal edge. A man was on his knees in the mud, pleading. Standing over him was Kong Tao. Even in the rain, he looked like a god of death, his black trench coat billowing around him. Please, Director Kong. I did not know. I swear. Tao had not shouted. He had not raged. He simply raised a black pistol, the metal glinting under the lightning. Betrayal is a cancer, Min-ho, Tao had said, his voice carrying over the storm. I'm just cutting it out. Bang. The body slumped. The mud turned red. And then, disaster. Jisoo's phone, clutched in her damp palm, slipped. It hit the pavement. Clatter. The sound was small, but in the sudden silence following the gunshot, it was a thunderclap. Tao's head snapped toward her. His eyes found her instantly in the shadows. There was no fear in his gaze, only cold calculation. Seize her, he had ordered. Before she could even scream, rough hands had grabbed her. The world tilted on its axis. The last thing she remembered was Tao walking toward her, the gun still smoking in his hand, and the scent of ozone filling her nose before darkness took her. Present day. The memory made bile rise in her throat. Jisoo pushed the bowl away. I'm going to be sick, she whispered. Tao was there in an instant. He moved with a speed that defied his size. He grabbed the trash bin and shoved it under her just as she retched. He did not recoil. He did not look away. One large, warm hand settled on her back, rubbing slow, soothing circles between her shoulder blades. The contact burned through the cashmere. It was confusing, the killer's hand offering comfort. Breathe, he instructed, his voice low and oddly gentle. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. When the spasms stopped, she slumped back against the cushions, exhausted. Tears pricked her eyes, tears of frustration, of fear, of helplessness. Tao handed her a napkin. He stayed crouched in front of her, balancing on the balls of his feet. This close, she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the slight shadow of stubble on his jaw. Is it the food? He asked, his brow furrowing. I can have the chef prepare something else. Ginger tea. It's the stress, she lied, though a small, terrifying voice in the back of her mind whispered another possibility. Her cycle was late. 2 weeks late. It's south this place. Tao stood up, the moment of intimacy shattering. The walls slammed back up. Then get used to the stress, he said coldly. Because you are not leaving. He walked toward the door, checking his gold watch. I have business. Do not go near the elevators. The guards have orders to tranquilize you if you cross the threshold of the foyer. Wait, she called out, desperation making her voice shrill. He paused, hand on the brass handle. How long? She asked. How long are you going to keep me here? Until I die of old age. Until you get bored. Tao looked back over his shoulder. The expression on his face was haunting, a mixture of regret and iron resolve. Until it's safe, he said. Safe from what? From everyone who wants to use you to get to me. He stepped out, and the heavy lock engaged with a finality that echoed in the empty room. Click thud. Outside the apartment, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The hallway was lined with men in black suits, standing like statues. Director, his lieutenant, Kim, stepped forward. Kim was a man of few words, bearing a scar that ran through his left eyebrow. Is the perimeter secure? Tao asked, his voice shedding the domestic softness he reserved for the penthouse. Yes, sir. But the Vipers are getting bold. We found a surveillance drone near the terrace an hour ago. We shot it down. Tao's eyes narrowed. The Vipers. A rival syndicate from Incheon, the vultures circling the carcass of the underworld. If they knew Jisoo was alive, if they knew he was hiding a witness, a civilian woman, in his personal sanctuary, they would not just kill her. They would use her. They would torture her to break him. And the terrifying truth was, it might work. Teo walked toward the private elevator, his chest feeling tight. He should not care. She was a liability. He should have put a bullet in her head at the docks and let the tide take her. It was the logical move. It was the Kong Teo move. But he remembered the way she had looked at him that night, terrified, soaking wet, clutching that violin case like it was a child. Her eyes, wide and brown, had stripped him bare. In that moment, he had not been the monster of Mapo. He had been a man looking at something pure, something he had lost the right to touch years ago. He had saved her. And in doing so, he had doomed them both. Double the guard on the roof, Teo ordered, stepping into the elevator. And tell Dr. Choi I want him here in the morning. Is the guest ill? Kim asked. She's vomiting, Teo said, staring at his reflection in the polished metal doors. And she's pale. Kim hesitated. Sir, could she be? He did not finish the sentence. He did not have to. The unsaid word hung in the elevator shaft like a grenade. Pregnant. Teo's blood ran cold. He clenched his fist until the leather of his gloves creaked. If she was pregnant, if she was carrying a child conceived from that one night she claimed to have a boyfriend. No. The timeline did not matter. If she was pregnant, she was infinitely more vulnerable. And infinitely more valuable. Back in the penthouse, Jisoo paced. The silence was deafening. She moved to the master bedroom. It was a cavernous space dominated by a king-sized bed with black silk sheets. She hated sleeping there, but the guest room lock was jammed. She suspected Teo had done it on purpose to keep her where he could see her on the monitors. She walked into the ensuite bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. She looked at her reflection. Hollow cheeks. Dark circles. She opened the medicine cabinet, searching for aspirin. Instead, her hand brushed against a small, hidden panel behind the mirror. It was loose. Curiosity pricked at her. She used her fingernail to pry it open. Inside was not drugs or money. It was a photograph. Old. Faded. A Polaroid. It showed a young boy, maybe 10 years old, standing next to a teenage girl holding a violin. The boy was scowling, looking at the camera with dark, intense eyes. The girl was smiling, radiant. Jisoo's breath hitched. She recognized the boy. The sharp jaw, the intense stare. It was Teo. But the girl. Jisoo leaned closer, her heart skipping a beat. The girl held a violin that looked identical to the one Jisoo played. An antique Guarneri copy. Why did the ruthless crime lord have a picture of a violinist hidden in his bathroom? Suddenly, a siren blared. It was not a police siren. It was a low, guttural wail that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The lights in the bathroom flickered and died, replaced by emergency red strobes. Intrusion alert. Sector 4. Terrace breach. Jisoo dropped the photo. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded her veins. The terrace. That was just outside the living room. She heard the sound of glass shattering, massive, expensive, bullet-resistant glass giving way under explosive force. Crash. Men shouting. Not Korean. Russian. Find her. The boss wants the girl. Jisoo scrambled backward, slipping on the tiled floor. She needed a weapon. She grabbed a heavy crystal perfume bottle from the vanity. She heard gunfire in the living room. The distinct thwip-thwip of silenced weapons. Then, the bedroom door flew open. Jisoo raised the bottle, ready to swing. A figure loomed in the red strobe light. Huge. Menacing. Get down. It was Teo. He was back. He had a gun in one hand and a knife in the other. His suit jacket was gone. His white shirt was splattered with something dark and wet. He did not wait for her to comply. He lunged across the room, tackling her onto the bed just as the bathroom mirror exploded into 1,000 shards behind them. Bullets chewed into the drywall where she had been standing a second ago. Teo covered her body with his, a human shield of muscle and fury. He was heavy, crushing the air from her lungs, but he felt solid. Indestructible. Stay down, he snarled into her ear, his breath hot and ragged. If you move, you die. He rolled off her, firing 3 shots into the doorway. A body thudded to the floor in the corridor. Teo grabbed her arm, hauling her up. His grip was bruising. We have to move. The panic room. Who are they? Jisoo screamed over the noise of the alarm. The past, Teo grimaced. He looked at her, his eyes wild. Blood was trickling down his temple, cutting a red path through the dragon scales on his neck. He dragged her toward the walk-in closet. But as they reached the threshold, a man stepped out from the shadows of the clothes racks. A giant with a shaved head and a scar running mouth to ear. The assassin raised a submachine gun. Teo did not have time to aim. He threw himself in front of Jisoo, shoving her backward into the racks of silk suits. Rat-a-tat-tat. Teo jerked violently. Once. Twice. No. Jisoo screamed. Teo roared, a sound of pure primal rage, and fired 1 shot. The assassin dropped, a hole in the center of his forehead. Teo stood swaying for a moment. He looked at Jisoo, his face pale in the flashing red light. He pressed a hand to his side. Dark blood began to bloom across the white shirt, spreading like a sinister flower. Teo. She whispered, the name slipping out before she could stop it. He stumbled toward her, his knees buckling. He fell against her, his weight dragging them both down to the floor amidst the ruin of expensive fabric. Listen to me, he gasped, gripping her shoulders with bloody hands. His eyes were losing focus. The safe, behind the painting, code 0-4-2-8. Stop talking, you re-hurt. Jisoo pressed her hands against his wound. The blood was hot, sticky. So much of it. Do not leave the room, he choked out, coughing. Blood flecked his lips. Promise me. I promise, she sobbed, terror overriding her hatred. Just stay awake. Teo's eyes drifted shut. The invincible monster, the warden of her prison, slumped against her, unconscious. Jisoo sat there in the dark closet, the red emergency lights pulsing like a dying heartbeat. She was covered in his blood. The gun lay on the floor inches from her hand. She could take it. She could run. The door was open. The guards were dead or distracted. She looked at the gun. Then she looked at Teo's pale face. She reached for the gun. Her fingers brushed the cold metal. And then she turned it toward the door, aiming at the darkness, and pulled Teo's head into her lap. Help, she screamed, her voice cracking. Somebody help us. The silence following the gunfire was heavier than the noise itself. It pressed against Jisoo's eardrums, a physical weight that made the air feel thin and insufficient. Dr. Choi worked with the grim efficiency of a butcher who had found a conscience. The dining room table, usually reserved for Teo's solitary, silent meals, had been converted into a triage unit. The smell of copper and antiseptic was suffocating, choking out the faint aroma of sandalwood that usually permeated the penthouse. Jisoo stood in the doorway, her hands scrubbed raw but still feeling the phantom stickiness of Teo's blood. She watched as the doctor's forceps dug into the muscle of Teo's side. Teo was awake. He had refused the anesthesia. I need to think, he had growled, his face the color of old parchment, sweat beading on his forehead like glass. He bit down on a leather strap, his neck muscles straining, cords of tension snapping tight as the metal probed his flesh. Every time he flinched, a phantom pain shot through Jisoo's own chest, cracking her ribs. It was irrational. He was her jailer. He was a monster. But when she closed her eyes, she saw him diving in front of the bullets, his body becoming a shield for hers. Clink. Dr. Choi dropped a deformed piece of lead into a metal bowl. It missed the liver by an inch, the doctor said, his voice trembling slightly. You are a lucky man, Director. Teo spat the strap out. His breathing was ragged, wet sounds that rattled in his chest. He turned his head slowly, his eyes finding Jisoo in the shadows. They were glazed with pain, dark pits of exhaustion, but the intensity was undimmed. Get her, a chair, Tao rasped. I'm fine, Jisoo said, though her knees felt like water. Sit, he commanded, the authority weak but present. She sat. Not because she was told to, but because seeing him like this, broken, bleeding, mortal, unmoored her world. The invincible god of the Obsidian Tower had bled for her. Dr. Choi finished the sutures and began packing the wound with gauze. You need rest, Director. No movement for 3 days. If the stitches tear, you will bleed out internally before I can get back up the elevator. Tao ignored him. He beckoned Jisoo closer with a twitch of his hand. She approached the table, the scent of his sweat and blood hitting her, a visceral, masculine scent that was terrifyingly intimate. Why? He whispered, his voice rough as gravel. Jisoo knew what he was asking. The gun. The open door. The chaos. She could have stepped over his body and disappeared into the rainy Seoul night. I do not owe you anything, she said, her voice shaking. But I'm not a murderer. Leaving you to die would have been the same as pulling the trigger. Tao studied her face, searching for a lie. He reached out, his hand trembling, and his fingers brushed her wrist. His skin was burning. Fever. You should have run, he murmured, his eyes drifting shut. You foolish girl. You should have run. The fever took him an hour later. It was a violent, thrashing heat that turned the powerful man into something delirious and vulnerable. Dr. Choi had left to secure blood bags from his private clinic, leaving Jisoo alone with the lieutenant, Kim, guarding the door. Jisoo sat by the bed, replacing the cold compress on Tao's forehead. He tossed and turned, tangling the black silk sheets around his legs. Do not look, he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep and hallucinations. Hide her. Under the floorboards, hide her. Jisoo paused, the washcloth dripping in her hand. Who was he trying to hide? I'm here, she whispered, an instinct she did not know she possessed taking over. She brushed the damp hair back from his forehead. You safe. No safety, he groaned, his head turning into her palm. Blood everywhere. My fault. All my fault. He gripped her hand suddenly, his strength surprising her. He pulled her down until her face was inches from his. His eyes opened, but they were not seeing her. They were seeing ghosts. I could not save him, Tao whispered, a tear, a single, impossible tear, leaking from the corner of his eye. Forgive me, Hyung. I could not save him. Jisoo's heart hammered. She sat frozen, allowing him to crush her fingers, witnessing the cracks in the armor of the Monster of Mapo. Beneath the dragon scales and the violence, there was a boy who was still grieving. She stayed like that for hours, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, the city lights outside casting long, lonely shadows across the room. In the quiet, the fear began to recede, replaced by a strange, heavy gravity. She was trapped in his orbit. And God help her, she was stopping fighting the pull. Morning brought a gray, listless light and a drop in Tao's temperature. Jisoo had fallen asleep in the armchair, curled up under one of his suit jackets. She woke to the sound of movement. Tao was trying to sit up. You idiot, she snapped, sleep making her bold. She rushed to the side of the bed, pushing him back down by his shoulders. His skin was cool now, clammy but no longer burning. Dr. Choi said you bleed out. Tao groaned, his face paling, but he stopped resisting. He looked at her, really looked at her, with a clarity that made her breath catch. You stayed, he said. It was not a question. It was a statement of wonder. The elevators are locked, she deflected, stepping back to put distance between them. The intimacy of the night before, the hand-holding, the fever whispers, hung in the air like smoke. Jisoo. He said her name differently now. Without the edge of command. It sounded like a prayer. We need to talk, he said. About the photograph. Jisoo froze. The Polaroid. She had dropped it in the bathroom during the attack. Tao reached under his pillow and pulled it out. The edges were crumpled, stained with a speck of his dried blood. He held it out to her. Ask, he said. Who is she? Jisoo asked, her voice barely a whisper. The girl with the violin. She looks like me. She was your mother. The world tilted. The floor seemed to drop away beneath Jisoo's feet. She grabbed the bedpost to steady herself. My mother died in a car accident when I was 3. My father raised me alone. Your father lied, Teo said, the harshness returning to his tone, but it was directed at the past, not her. Your mother was Song Eun-hye. A prodigy. And she did not die in a car accident. She was executed. Executed. The word felt foreign, violent. She witnessed a transaction she was not supposed to see. Between my father and the police commissioner. Teo looked at the photo, his thumb tracing the boy's face. I was there. I was 12. I was the one who found her hiding in the closet. Jisoo felt the blood drain from her face. You. I did not kill her, Teo said quickly, desperation leaking into his voice. I tried to hide her. Like I tried to hide you. But my father found us. He made me watch. He closed his eyes, the memory evidently of physical pain. Before she died, she made me promise. She told me she had a daughter. A baby. She begged me to protect you. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. So I am what? Jisoo asked, her voice trembling with rage and grief. Your charity case. Your penance. You were my burden, Teo admitted, opening his eyes. They were dark pools of regret. I watched you from the shadows for 20 years. I paid for your conservatory tuition anonymously. I ensured your father's debts were cleared. I kept the wolves away. Until 3 weeks ago. Until 3 weeks ago, he agreed. When you stumbled into my world and shattered the glass wall I had built between us. Jisoo stared at him. The Monster of Mapo was not her captor. He was her guardian angel, twisted and broken by the same violence that had orphaned her. Why did not you tell me? Because monsters do not get to be heroes, Jisoo. And the closer I get to you, the more danger you are in. The door to the bedroom burst open. Lieutenant Kim stood there, his face pale, his scar livid against his skin. Director. We have a problem. Teo's demeanor shifted instantly. The vulnerable patient vanished, the warlord returned. He ignored the pain in his side and swung his legs over the edge of the bed. Report. The Vipers did not just find the safe house by luck, Kim said, his voice tight. Someone gave them the codes. Someone inside. Who? Teo's voice was a low growl. Kim hesitated, his eyes darting to Jisoo. It was Dr. Choi. Teo went still. Choi. We intercepted a transfer. 5 million won to an offshore account. He sold her medical records, sir. Teo looked at Jisoo. A look of dawning horror. Her records? Teo asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. Yes, sir. Specifically, the blood tests from her arrival. Jisoo felt a cold knot form in her stomach. What blood tests? Teo looked at her, and for the first time since she had met him, she saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not for himself. For her. Kim, Teo said, standing up. He swayed, clutching his side, fresh blood blooming on the bandage. Prepare the car. We leave now. Director, you see a not walk, I said now. Teo roared, the sound cracking the air. He turned to Jisoo. He stepped close, crowding her, his heat enveloping her. He reached out and cupped her face, his thumb stroking her cheekbone. The gesture was possessive, desperate. You re-pregnant, he said. The words hung in the air. Jisoo's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The nausea. The missed cycle. The fatigue. No, she whispered. That's impossible. Dr. Choi confirmed it in the file he sold, Teo said, his eyes searching hers. The Vipers know. That's why they sent a hit squad. They do not just want a witness, Jisoo. They want the heir. Heir. She shook her head, confusion making her dizzy. It's my ex-boyfriend S. It has nothing to do with you. Tao's expression hardened. A mask of steel sliding into place. It does not matter whose biology it is, he said, his voice flat, leaving no room for argument. If you are under my protection, that child is mine. And if the vipers get you, they will cut it out of you to get to me. The brutality of the image made Jisoo gasp. Her hands flew to her stomach instinctively. Tao saw the movement. His eyes softened, just a fraction. He covered her hands with his own large, rough hand. I failed your mother, he swore, the words vibrating against her skin. I will not fail you. Or this child. The escape was a blur of motion and pain. They moved through the service tunnels of the Obsidian Tower. Tao leaned heavily on Kim, his face gray, breath coming in short, sharp hitches. Jisoo walked beside him, carrying the only thing she had been allowed to take, the violin case. Where are we going? She asked as they reached the underground garage. The docks, Tao gritted out. There's a boat. We go to Jeju. I have a safe house there that is not on the books. They reached the armored sedan. Kim opened the back door. But before Tao could get in, a single shot rang out. Ping. A bullet sparked off the concrete pillar inches from Tao's head. Ambush. Kim shouted, shoving Tao and Jisoo behind the car. Shadows detached themselves from the darkness of the garage. Men in tactical gear. Not police. Vipers. Kong Tao, a voice echoed through the garage. It was a Russian accent, thick and mocking. You look tired, my friend. Tao pulled a gun from his waistband. He checked the clip. 7 rounds. He looked at Kim. How many? 12, at least, Kim said, checking his own weapon. We are pinned. Tao looked at Jisoo. She was crouched by the tire, eyes wide, trembling. But she was not screaming. She was looking at him, waiting for him to tell her what to do. He realized then that he would burn the world to ash to keep that look in her eyes. Kim, Tao said softly. Give me your comms. He took the earpiece. Listen to me, Tao said to Jisoo, grabbing her shoulders. When I start shooting, you get in the car. You drive. You do not stop. What? No. She grabbed his lapel, staining her hands with his fresh blood. You see a not stay. I see a not run, Jisoo. I'm slowing you down. I'm not leaving you, she screamed, the sound tearing from her throat. You promised. You said you would not fail me. Tao froze. He looked at her, at the fire in her eyes. It was the same fire her mother had. Please, he whispered, pressing his forehead against hers for a fleeting second. Go. No. She grabbed his hand, the one holding the gun, and forced his fingers around the grip. We go together. Or we die together. I am done being the victim. Something shifted in the air. The resignation in Tao's eyes vanished, replaced by a terrifying, cold resolve. He looked at the woman who was carrying a life inside her, a life he had already claimed as his own. He nodded once. Kim, Tao barked. Cover fire. We are punching through. Tao stood up, ignoring the agony in his side, raising his weapon. He was not a man anymore. He was a force of nature. Get in the car, he roared, opening fire. As Jisoo scrambled into the driver's seat, the engine roaring to life, she saw Tao standing amidst the hail of bullets, a dark angel of death, refusing to fall. He fired, moved, fired. 2 men dropped. He threw himself into the passenger seat just as Jisoo stomped on the gas. The car squealed out of the garage, shattering the wooden barrier, plunging into the rainy Seoul night. Jisoo drove like a madwoman, weaving through traffic. Beside her, Tao slumped against the window, his breathing bubbling. Did we make it? She asked, tears streaming down her face. Tao turned his head weakly. He looked at the rearview mirror. Not yet, he whispered. Behind them, 3 black SUVs were closing in, their lights cutting through the darkness like the eyes of predators. Drive, Jisoo, Tao said, his hand finding hers on the gearshift, his grip weak but anchoring. Drive to the bridge. The bridge? Why? Because, Teo said, closing his eyes, that's where we end this. The Mapo bridge stretched out before them like the spine of a dead leviathan, slick with rain and shrouded in mist. Jisu's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, the leather groaning under her grip. Stop, Teo commanded. His voice was a wet rasp, barely audible over the roar of the engine and the drumming rain. We see a not stop. Jisu shouted, glancing at the rearview mirror. The three black SUVs were gaining, their headlights blinding, growing larger like predatory eyes. They'll box us in. Stop the car, Jisu. Now. There was a finality in his tone that cut through her panic. She slammed on the brakes. The armored sedan fishtailed, tires screaming against the wet asphalt, before coming to a halt in the center of the deserted bridge. Silence rushed in, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the idle purr of the engine and Teo's labored breathing. Why? She whispered, turning to him. Teo was checking the chamber of his gun. His face was gray, the color of ash, and the bandage on his side was soaked through, a dark blossom spreading across his ruined shirt. He looked at her, and the ghost of a smile touched his lips. Because I do not run, he said softly. And I do not let monsters chase my family. He reached into the center console and pulled out a small, black remote detonator. Jisu's eyes widened. What is that? Insurance. He looked at the SUVs slowing down behind them, forming a barricade. Figures were stepping out into the rain, silhouettes armed with assault rifles. I knew they would come for you eventually. I prepared the board. Teo, you see a not go out there. You can barely stand. He unbuckled his seatbelt. The movement made him hiss in pain, his jaw clenching tight enough to snap bone. Stay in the car. Lock the doors. Do not look away, no matter what happens. No. She grabbed his arm. The heat of his fever burned her fingertips. I'm not letting you die for me. He turned, and for a moment, the pain vanished from his eyes, replaced by an intensity that made her chest crack open. He cupped the back of her neck, pulling her forehead against his. I am not dying for you, he whispered, his breath mingling with hers, tasting of iron and rain. I am living for you. There is a difference. He kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a branding, a desperate collision of souls on the edge of the abyss. It tasted of blood and goodbye. Then he shoved the door open and stepped into the storm. Teo stood alone on the wet asphalt, the wind whipping his torn shirt. He looked like a ruin of a man, swaying slightly, blood dripping from his fingertips to mix with the rain. The leader of the Vipers, a massive Russian named Dmitri, stepped forward from the line of SUVs. He laughed, a deep, booming sound that echoed off the steel cables. The Monster of Mapo, Dmitri called out, spreading his arms. Look at you. Broken. Bleeding. Hiding behind a woman's skirts. Teo did not speak. He just watched, his dark eyes tracking the positions of the 12 men. They were confident. Careless. They saw a dying wolf and forgot that a dying wolf bites hardest. Give us the girl, Dmitri shouted, racking the slide of his rifle. And we will make your death quick. Keep her, and we will peel the skin from your bones while she watches. Teo raised his head. The rain plastered his hair to his skull. He looked up at the steel girders of the bridge, then back at Dmitri. You made a mistake, Dmitri, Teo said, his voice low but carrying effortlessly over the wind. And what is that? You stepped onto my bridge. Teo raised his left hand, revealing the detonator. Dmitri's smile faltered. You are bluffing. You would not blow yourself up. I have nothing left to lose, Teo lied. But you have an empire to run. It was a standoff. The air crackled with tension, thick as static. Inside the car, Jisoo watched through the rain-streaked windshield. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She saw a movement to the right, a shadow detaching itself from the railing. A 13th man. A sniper, flanking Teo. Teo did not see him. No, Jisoo whispered. She looked at the gun Teo had left on the passenger seat. The metal was cold, heavy. A tool of death. She had spent her life creating music, creating beauty. Her hands were insured for millions. They were made for holding a bow, not a trigger. But looking at Tao, the men who had watched over her for 20 years, the men who had taken a bullet for her, the men who claimed her unborn child as his own, she realized that beauty meant nothing without survival. She grabbed the gun. She opened the door. Dropped the detonator. Dmitri screamed, losing patience. Kill him. The sniper on the flank raised his rifle. Bang. The sound was not the sharp crack of a rifle. It was the roar of a handgun. The sniper's head snapped back. He crumpled over the railing and fell into the dark river below. Dmitri spun around, shock registering on his face. Jisoo stood by the car door. Her stance was perfect, her arms locked, the gun smoking in her hands. She was not trembling. Her face was a mask of cold fury. Tao looked back at her, his eyes wide. Kill them all. Dmitri roared. Time fractured. Tao did not hesitate. He thumbed the detonator. Boom. The asphalt beneath the SUVs erupted. Shaped charges, planted months ago for a doomsday scenario, detonated with concussive force. The explosion was deafening. Fireballs consumed the enemy vehicles, throwing bodies into the air like ragdolls. The bridge shook violently, metal groaning in protest. Tao was thrown backward by the blast wave. He hit the ground hard, rolling to a stop near the guardrail. Tao. Jisoo screamed. She ran toward him, ignoring the burning wreckage, ignoring the few survivors crawling from the flames. Dmitri staggered out of the fire, his clothes smoking, his face a mask of blood. He raised his pistol, aiming at Jisoo's back. Tao saw him. He was on the ground, his vision swimming, his body shutting down. He could not stand. He could not reach her. But he had the knife. The small boot knife he always carried. With a roar that tore his throat raw, Tao threw the blade. It was a desperate, impossible throw. It buried itself in Dmitri's throat. The Russian gasped, clutching his neck, and fell to his knees. He stared at Tao with disbelief before collapsing face first into the wet asphalt. Silence returned to the bridge, heavier than before. Jisoo reached Tao. She fell to her knees, sliding in the rain and blood. Tao. Look at me. He was pale, so pale. His eyes were half open, staring up at the stormy sky. The bandage on his side was gone, blown away or torn off, revealing the ugly, jagged wound that was pouring life onto the road. Jisoo. He wheezed. Blood bubbled past his lips. I'm here. I'm right here. She pressed her hands over the wound, trying to stem the tide. Do not you dare close your eyes. You promised. You said you would not fail me. Did I? He managed to ask, his voice fading. Did I keep the wolves away? Tears streamed down Jisoo's face, mixing with the rain. Yes. Yes, you did. You killed them all. Now stay. Stay for the reward. Tao smiled weakly. He reached up, his bloody hand trembling, and touched her cheek. He left a smear of crimson on her skin. The music, he whispered. I always loved your music. His hand dropped. His eyes drifted shut. No. Jisoo screamed, a sound of pure, unadulterated grief that pierced the night. She shook him. Kong Tao. Wake up. Wake up. Sirens wailed in the distance. Blue and red lights reflected off the wet pavement. Lieutenant Kim's reinforcements. The police. It did not matter. Jisoo pulled Tao's heavy, broken body into her arms, rocking him back and forth in the rain, wailing against the roar of the thunder. 5 years later the garden in Jeju was in full bloom, a riot of camellias and hydrangeas overlooking the azure sea. The air smelled of salt and sweet nectar, a stark contrast to the scent of ozone and blood that still visited Jisoo's nightmares occasionally. Jisoo sat on the veranda, tuning her violin. The guarneri hummed under her fingers, responsive and alive. She was not hiding anymore. But she was not Song Ji-soo, the rising star, either. She was someone new. Someone forged in fire. Mama. Look. Look. A small girl, 4 years old with wild curls and eyes like obsidian, came sprinting across the grass. She was holding a beetle with the triumphant reverence only a child could muster. Careful, Hannah, Ji-soo smiled, lowering the bough. It has fragile wings. Appa says beetles are like tanks, Hannah declared seriously. They have armor. Does he now? A shadow fell over them. Kang Tae-oh walked out onto the veranda. He moved with a slight limp, a permanent reminder of the night the bridge fell. A jagged scar ran up the side of his neck, disappearing into his hairline, the mark of a surgery that had taken 12 hours and 3 cardiac arrests to complete. He was not wearing a suit. He wore a simple linen shirt and trousers, his feet bare. The Monster of Mapo had retired, his empire dismantled and rebuilt into something legitimate, something clean. Mostly. He knelt down, wincing slightly as his old hip injury flared. He looked at the beetle in Hannah's hand with intense seriousness. It is a good beetle, Tae-oh agreed. Strong. Resilient. Hannah beamed. She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. Up. Up. Tae-oh groaned theatrically but lifted her effortlessly. He held her as if she were made of glass, yet with the confidence of a man who knew he could crush the world to keep her safe. Hannah was not his blood. She was the daughter of a man who had abandoned Ji-soo, a man whose name was never spoken in this house. But Hannah had Tae-oh's fierce scowl when she was concentrating, and his protective streak when she played with the stray cats. Biology was a suggestion. Love was a blood oath. Are you playing today? Tae-oh asked, looking at Ji-soo over the child's head. His eyes were softer now, the gold flecks bright in the sunlight, but the hunger was still there. It always would be. I was thinking about it, Ji-soo said. A lullaby. Play something with fire, Tae-oh murmured. He walked over, carrying Hannah, and placed a hand on Ji-soo's shoulder. His grip was warm, solid. Play the song from the bridge. Ji-soo smiled. She lifted the violin to her chin. She played. It was not a sad song. It was a song of storms and survival, of steel clashing against bone, and the silence that comes after the violence. It was a symphony of rain. As the music swelled, carrying out over the ocean, Tae-oh closed his eyes, resting his chin on top of Hannah's head, swaying slightly to the rhythm of his wife's melody. The cage was gone. The glass walls were shattered. But he was still her guardian. And she was his heart. And in the garden of their fortress, surrounded by the sea, the silence was finally, truly, broken.